Okay, so we're live now, and we're here to celebrate the book launch of Hadassah Shiradski uh, book, What Happened at Hawthorne House, which came out um, the end of last week. It's available for paperback and ebook, and we're still running the ebook special of 99 cents USD for the rest of this week. So you still have a chance to get it at a discount through Friday. And if you're in the UK, there's something wrong with the UK pricing for the paperback.
It should
now
be
fixed. It's now
Is it
fixed.
fixed? Oh, good.
Yeah.
I was going. It was supposed to be fixed today, but it wasn't this morning when I checked. So it is now.
We're all
Okay,
good.
good. And hopefully it'll stay that way.
Yes.
So sometimes there's something a little messy with the UK Amazon, but it should be up at what's the W store in the United Kingdom? Not Weston's. It's Waterstones. Waterstone.
Yes.
It should be available on Waterstone soon. So I just got the message from Ingram. So if there is trouble again, we'll have another UK choice, which will be priced correctly. So usually how we start these launches is I tell the story about my mother. And Steve and I both grew up as book lovers and always dreamed of opening a publishing company and working especially with authors who are just getting started, because there's so much in the publishing industry where they want you to be published somewhere so you can get your foot in the next step. And it's difficult to get to your first publication. And so we really wanted to focus on debut authors and earlier in their career authors as much as we could. And one of the reasons is because when my sister and I were growing up, my mother read to us every night, and she was a nurse. And so sometimes she would come off a long 15-hour floor shift, and we were merciless and would beg her to read and read and read until she would sometimes fall asleep on the couch. She didn't have any voice left. We would ask her to read to us when she was sick. It didn't matter. So we were little mean kids, but we grew up to, both of us, to really love reading and stories. And so one of the things that has happened to us is when we're reading books, my mother becomes the narrator. And so for me, when we get manuscripts, there are three of us that have to greenlight it. And I usually greenlight it at the time I start to hear my mother narrate the story. And we've had a book where that happened in the very last chapter. And we've had a book where it happened in the first two lines of the book. And so it happens anywhere in between. But I start to get the rhythm with the book and the feeling of the book. And then suddenly my mom's voice comes in my head. And so I wanted to start by reading that passage for me. And here it is. For her part, Rosalind just watched them leave before she placed her newly made crown on her head and stood up following the other two, and found out what chores she'd been assigned this week. Just because I probably won't get to wear my crown in the end doesn't make the slightest bit of difference, she mused. I made it after all, so it's mine. And for that instant, hidden from the others, she was the queen. And I love this. I really love the prologue too. The prologue really hooked me. But this is where I finally felt like I really got Rosalind. And I really started to kind of get the feel for the need to be the queen amongst the girls. So I think that's, I went back and read that section of the book a couple times. And I think for me, that opening scene was really, really meaningful. So I wanted to start by asking you, what was the inspiration for the story?
Oh, frankly, it's initially I literally just saw a prompt to write a flash fiction involving a living room, and I started thinking about abandoned houses and about the stories they hold, and the fact that these houses and every house that you like, most houses anyway, have stories in them of people that lived there before you. I start thinking, okay, so what if in this abandoned house there was a toy or something that could be a toy, like a misused prop or something? And I thought, well, what could survive a house being destroyed or made derelict? And I thought, well, something metal. And I thought, okay, so a crown, but I wanted the crown to be something that could hurt the wearer. And I thought, oh, barbed wire.
Yeah.
And from there, I just had this image in my head of a man who later become Andrew, holding a crown made of barbed wire, looking up and seeing a girl standing there, and just thinking, oh. And that's what I was writing to the entire time was that scene. And
Excellent.
so from the beginning, I really wanted. I think I was just trying to. The inspiration just came from forgotten things and children forgotten about or overlooked. And
Right.
they're people too. They have stories too. And what
Yeah.
would happen if someone were to come across it? And what if that story wasn't very nice? They're still
Right.
people, you know?
Yeah. 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 So so what was it that made you really go to, because it's a very gothic type story in its feel, where the atmosphere is like its own character and the house is like its own character. So was it, were you attract when you first started think about it, did it automatically start in that trope, in the gothic feel for you? Abandoned houses make me always think of gothic, abandoned buildings.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
All I knew about the setting going in, at least from like, aside from the derelict part, um, on the Rosalind side of things, all I knew was that it'd have wooden creaking floorboards and spiders. And
Oh yeah.
and I knew that and I knew I wanted the scene of Rosalind looking over the banisters of the stairs. And
Mm-hmm.
that's and I and it's just very easy to think, oh, okay, this is going to be a gothic story then.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot I can do here, and like a big old house in the middle of Oxfordshire, in the middle of the countryside. It basically writes itself as being gothic.
Right, right. And I think that's one of the things I really like about gothic themes, besides the kind of atmosphere, but I love the old house or the old abbey or the old asylum kind of.
I I think it's the isolation aspect to it,
Yeah.
of the fact that like these girls aren't friends. They could be
Right,
friends,
right.
and in another situation they probably would be, frankly.
Yeah,
But or at least they'd be on good speaking terms. But they'd be friendly with each other. But considering their situation, they're not friends, and they all want to be friends. They all want to be respected and to be liked. And
right.
just and the story is really just Rosalind trying her best to be liked, and when that doesn't work, to be feared, because that's what she knows. Yeah.
I think that's a really interesting part of the book, is the dynamics of the girls and their relationship with each other, and also the relationship with the house, with the idea of, the kind of orphan aspect of, the matron isn't really your mother. It's more like the building, in a way, is your mother, and the thing that you want to have a piece of in some way. And so it's very true. The girls are very much how girls would be if there's no real parental love. Make that stop, can you? Um, real parental influence or place of belonging. Like the children have to kind of find their own way to belong. And
They have nowhere to belong, so they made the castle so they'd have a place. And turns out that comes with a lot of complications.
right, because they are children, and children are they're I think sometimes we think of children as flat dimensional characters instead of fully fleshed out characters. And they are. Like, we've raised a bunch of kids, so I have a very jaded view of this, I think, because they're all so different and they were all raised here, So sometimes I'm like, how can you all be so very different? You were raised by the same two people in the same home, the same way. So, but they are, and they're very complex. And I think that as humans, we all want to belong to a group or a person or a place. But I think children especially feel that if it's missing from their upbringing or suddenly taken from them, that sense of tribe becomes brutal and it causes them to behave brutally with others, I think. And it's well,
you can tell who's grew up reading Lord of the Flies.
But it's well reflected in this story. Like I think you do a good job with the dynamic between the girls, you know. So I love that part. So what do you have any favorite Gothic stories or books?
Frankly, Dracula.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I recently finished reading it for the second time. I really like Dracula. I also really like a lot of the old folk tales and fairy tales.
Yes.
Like the first ones I read were the original Grimm versions, but I actually prefer the older ones that aren't so well known. And
Right.
I don't know. I don't know if this counts as Gothic, but I'm also very much into Alice in Wonderland. And
Oh, I am too. You and
Yes.
I should probably hang out much more than we have. But I am a huge
probably.
I am a huge Alice in Wonderland fan. So you guys can't see it because of the way the camera is pointed, but we're in my office and
Hold on.
I have a whole Alice in Wonderland corner in my office that's art and statuary and
So cool.
yeah, honey, don't take that down. Everything will fall. But yeah,
Oh.
I'm a huge
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. There's my Cheshire cat. Yeah, but I'm a huge fan of Alice. And so, and you know, it's funny because I sometimes people will say, well, what's your favorite Gothic story? And I'm a huge fan of Rebecca, and I'm a huge fan of Dracula, and I'm a huge fan of Frankenstein. And I know a lot of people go back and forth about whether or not Frankenstein counts as Gothic or science fiction or
I think it counts.
I do too. I mean, you've got a creepy old house. You've got a, scientist who faints all the time. I think you've got all of the intrigue.
I think that there's no reason why it can't be both sci-fi and Gothic.
And Gothic, right? Yeah. But I always inadvertently end up including Alice in Wonderland, even though I'm not sure it's really a Gothic tale. But I think it's because Wonderland has the same. To me, the house or the asylum, or the abbey or the castle is almost like its own character. And to me, Wonderland is like its own character.
Yeah.
Like
I feel like that's why I make the connection too.
Yeah.
Because it's like Alice, she's she's a kid. She's like 7, I think. And she's not the one in control of the situation, and she's trying to be. And everyone's telling her, go here, do this, that. Go that way. No, I didn't say that way, I meant that way. You heard me wrong. Like, and the Wonderland self-injures around her. And I know I'm just thinking about in Looking Glass, when she's literally following the chess rules. And I don't know, I'm thinking about the girls in Hawthorne House, how they're all playing games with each other, and they're all trying to outmaneuver each other.
It's all about the outmaneuver. It's all about the outmaneuver. Who can use logic, who feeds off of emotion, and who wins the game at the end. So
who's the most observant, but who's willing to call that bluff,
Right. It's a great comparison. So when you write, do you listen to music or are you a quiet writer?
You see, I do both.
Do you? That's interesting.
I either write in complete silence in the middle of the night, or I listen to songs that I have several different playlists of it's honestly mostly video game soundtracks.
Interesting.
So when if I'm playing a game or watching a playthrough, and I hear a track I like, I then find that track, get a 10-minute extended version of the track, and add it to the playlist. And I definitely I listen to those particularly when I'm editing, but when I'm writing the original first draft or redrafting, I mostly listen to songs with lyrics sometimes, or yeah, or like instrumental music box versions of songs that I think apply to characters in that story.
That's interesting.
There's one game called The Path, from 2000s, I think, and there's a song in it called Forest Theme, and it's very eerie. The game itself is based off Red Riding Hood, and it's a very eerie, off kilter kind of track. And I listened to that on repeat whilst writing any scenes with Sophie in them.
That's fun. That's fun. And so, because a lot of the writers that we've asked that question for before, they all write in silence, and that always surprises me. Now, I don't write fiction. Occasionally, I'll write poetry, but I really write government policy, so it's not really exciting. And I have to listen to music. Like if it's silent, I can't turn the government bulletin into English that people can understand. And I have to listen to the same, either like the same 5 songs over and over, or this is Steve's favorite, the same song over and over all day long. I just put it on repeat. But I feel like
I check my writing by how many times I've pressed replay on the 10-minute extended soundtrack.
Because there's a rhythm to it, right? There's a rhythm to it, and you need to keep it going.
There's a reason why I can never listen to that song. What is it? The Happy song?
Oh, I don't know. Because I listened to it that happy song over and over that one day. That was a bad day. But it's why Steve and I can't share an office. His office in his new house, his office is upstairs. At our old house, mine was upstairs. But
and there's soundproofing between us.
Right, there's soundproofing between us because Steve needs quiet to edit or to write, and I need repetitive noise. So
when I do listen to music, it's always the soundtrack's always very very much in a cycle. Like they're very repetitive songs. Often has one of the ones I like is from a game called Alice Manus Returns. It's based on Alice in Wonderland. And there's a track called Doll Houses, and the bass line is a ticking clock, and I really like that.
I'm gonna write that down so I can listen to it.
It's a very Victorian London game, and the soundtrack is mostly violin, piano, cello.
Okay, very fun.
Has there ever been any songs or, when you look at classical pieces or anything that have actually inspired you to write a story or have made a story idea pop into your head?
Honestly, Dance with Sugar Plum Fairy has once.
From the Nutcracker.
Yeah. I listened to it and I thought, oh, there's something there.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know, I listen to lots of classical music if I'm writing, especially when I'm editing. I don't necessarily know the names of it.
Right. It's something you've got on a playlist and you put on repeat.
Yeah.
Sometimes that'll happen.
And if I find something, I add it to the playlist, and then I immediately forget the title.
See, I do the same thing, and Steve will be like, "Hey, what's the name of this song? Or who's singing this? Or who's the composer?" I'm like, playlist 4, song 5. I don't know. You'll have to grab my phone and look. But
or the one after this song.
Right. Because I hear something and it catches me, and I'm like, okay, add to playlist, and I don't necessarily always pay attention. So, okay, so when you write, do you outline your plot? Are you an outliner, or are you just write and see where it takes you?
Again, this is very much a question where Hawthorne House is the exception rather than the rule. In that I'm usually, I might have the barest idea of an endpoint. I'm very much, I wing it. I have like, all I know going in is the characters, like personality, their name, maybe, or I have the setting in mind, or I have the key factors in mind, and I have the endpoint, and I'll write till I get there, or I have like a scene in mind, I'll write till I get there, and then see what happens next. But with Hawthorne House, I started doing that, and I realized really early on that I couldn't, because I needed to make a schedule of the girls' days, and I needed to figure out who had done what to who, and who knew what, and how much Rosalind would know if she was in this part of the house, or if they told her, and how fast the rumors would spread. So Hawthorne House is the only time I've actually planned out something more than just the barest outline.
Because you have to, because there's a lot of characters, and the girls interact with each other so much, so there's a lot of detail.
There are 5 players to keep track of.
Right. Right.
And I did have several scenes in mind though from the get-go. Is it okay if I give a spoiler?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Yeah, we can give one out.
Okay. So obviously I had the scene in mind of Andrew looking up and seeing Rosalind, and in the first draft, that was how the book ended. It didn't have it. It ended with that scene with Andrew seeing Rosalind and just going, oh no, essentially. But then I decided to flesh out Andrew and flesh out part 2 a lot more. So that part went from epilogue to a whole extra half of the book. But from the start, so I had that in mind. I had the end of chapter 3 in mind, specifically Sophie lifting the scepter, and so I was imagining a sort of like a video game cutscene, and my mental camera was low to the ground, and which is why I wasn't sitting on the floor at that point. And I just had this image in my head of like this really dusty attic, of like the sunbeams coming through kind of grayish, and a girl on the floor, and then the character would become Sophie standing behind them and swinging the hammer down.
Okay.
And I knew I had to write to that scene. So that was one scene. The other one I had was just Rosalind running down the path in the garden.
Okay.
And the third scene I had in mind was the incident at the end of chapter 4, the end of part 1.
Right.
And I knew from the start that was going to be how Rosalind's story at that point ended.
Okay.
And the event that happens is actually a recurring nightmare of mine. I've had it since I was a kid, and so I waited until I had a nightmare again, then woke up and then wrote that scene in one go.
Interesting. I wonder how many people have a scene in their book that's based on a reoccurring dream or nightmare. So that I've never really thought to ask that question before, but we should from now on, because that's fascinating.
Obviously, the way things play out in the book is not how it plays out in my nightmare.
Right. Right. But it's an interesting
certain things such as what happens with the stairs. That's always there, you know.
Okay.
And obviously, my family home is very different from Hawthorne House.
Right.
But the principle of what happens remains the same. And I knew going in that would be a fine scene, or what I thought would be the end of the book.
It's very interesting to me because I have reoccurring dreams and reoccurring nightmares, and I have a lot of reoccurring dreams where the people will change, but the setting is the same. Like there's this particular house that I've never seen in real life, but like tension dreams always happen in this particular house that overlooks a lake. And so, like, I'm sure a psychoanalyst would have field day with these dreams, but I've never really thought about how a writer may have a reoccurring place dream or people dream that influences a particular scene in some way. That's really interesting.
In my case, a reoccurring event dream.
Right. That's really interesting to me. I think that's fascinating.
And what's interesting is that after writing the scene, I then didn't have that recurring nightmare for like 2 years later. And then it came back.
Interesting.
Wow.
That's really interesting because it almost like released it in some way.
Exactly, yeah. And I had noticed that the incident that happens, I have a lot of my stories involve the elements involved in that in some aspect because okay, massive spoiler, I do have a mild fear of fire.
Okay.
So particularly striking matches. So a lot of my stories involve fire in some aspect. And I noticed that after writing Hawthorne House, and a family member who read the book went up to me and was like, "Is it just me? Have all or do a lot of your stories seem to have this happen?" And I went,
Right.
"Oh,
Right.
so I
Right.
hadn't noticed until then."
That's very interesting. That's interesting. I want to ask Kev if he's afraid of underground places now because of below. But it's because that one freaked me out. I'm very claustrophobic. But it's interesting because I also have a big fear of fire. Like one of my reoccurring nightmares is the children being stuck in a fire and me not being able to get to them. And Steve's out of town. Yeah. And so like it's trying to count heads and make sure everybody's accounted for, and it's awful. Yeah. And luckily very short.
Well, the worst dream for you would be a fire that's coming out of control. You're in an elevator and you're getting down into a cave.
Forget it. Yeah, forget it. I probably would die in my sleep if I ever had that dream. That's like
probably what happened then.
Yeah, all the fears rolled into one. So
there we go.
Yeah. But I really want to make sure we think to ask that question. You should write that down. Like, is there any part of a reoccurring dream or nightmare that has influenced a part of this story? Because that is fascinating to me. And I've never really thought about...
I find it's like, because when I was writing it, I was pouring a lot of my own anxiety from the nightmare into Rosalind.
Right.
Because, of course, she'd react that way. She comes from my brain.
Right.
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 Like, and whilst, of course, Rosalind isn't me, and we are very different people, and she's very different to myself as a child as well. My instinctual reaction to something like that, I thought would make the writing feel more authentic if I put it into Rosalind. And I think it worked.
I do too. I think it worked. I definitely feel like it's authentic. It's a really gripping story because, the children are so real to me. And I know a lot of people are like, they're like, these children are horrible to each other when you read certain books where the kids are, trying to find their tribe and tear each other up and tear themselves up. But I think that, to me, that's a very true part. If you've ever been a part of orphanages or foster system in the United States, you meet these kids every day, like it's a very real part of their core self is not necessarily being a bully or being mean, but trying to find their space in the world because it's not defined by family, which is how a lot of our space is defined the first 10 years of our lives.
Yeah. And I've said this before to people, but there are no villains in Hawthorne House.
No, there aren't.
They're just children trying their best to cope with this terrible situation in the only ways they know how, which aren't particularly healthy, it turns out.
No, because they're just children. They don't have 40-year-old coping skills, based on solid mental health. They're children making sense of a world that makes no sense.
Yeah, and they all of them just want to be respected by the others, or at least tolerated, and none of them really have a chance to like each other. And I was thinking the other day that had this been in a different scenario, like if they had, say, support and actual help, then honestly, like Sophie and Rosalind and Willow would be friends.
I think so too. I told Steve that after reading it. I was like, if these children had emotional support and mental support, I think these three characters would get along. Like they would go outside and play together, or would play games together.
Like if like if a certain incident hadn't happened, and if Willow and Heather hadn't been pulled into the Clover Cart, or if they'd decided to end the game when the new girls joined,
Right.
like Rosalind would be friends with Willow.
Yeah.
And she's trying to be friends with Willow and not doing a good job because of the game. And
I can't help but love them though, because I feel like you've done a very good job of authentically portraying where children try to find their rank and place when they don't have a support system to help them feel safe. And so it's terrible, but it's so real. But I like what you said.
None of them have a support system. Like
none.
And for Rosalind, it's kind of worse in a sense, because the other girls in the Hawthorne House, they don't have families anymore. But Rosalind did.
Right.
And Rosalind does have a living family, and they didn't want her.
Right.
So, and Marie and Sophie know that, and so they do use that against her once or twice. And so for Rosalind, it's even more potent because she could belong somewhere, but they were like, no, we don't want you. So she's like, okay, in that case, I'm going to make this place my domain. The others are obviously like, no, we want a place too.
It's very insightful, I think, in how children make decisions when there's no healthy support system for them. So I really enjoyed that part of the book. I know a lot of people don't like children books where the children are mean to each other. And I'm like, well, listen, then this may not be the book for you. Like, if that's a big turn off for you, look for something else.
None of them are nice in this.
You're right. But I would agree with what you say, that none of them are villains. They're just children. And they're children.
They're just trying to cope with a terrible situation.
Yeah. No support
barely
system.
Any coping mechanism. And
yes. But they act so old in some ways, but like children do, that are trying to be adult-like, even though they're trapped in their.
They've all been through stuff. They've all been through less than good things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if there was a book that was just a bunch of children all getting along perfectly and
happily ever after,
and never have any disagreements, who would want to read that?
The 10-page book. The 10-page book. The end.
Yeah.
But I think that's what gives it the horror flair, is because there are children that are growing up without support systems and support groups, and horror can be anything, but to me, some of the most striking horror is what I consider the real life scenario horror.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it can be so brutal and so true.
I did, when I was writing it, for me, it was very much a case of, this could plausibly happen.
Yes.
Like, a group of kids could plausibly make this happen. And, I was very into playing pretend as a kid. Obviously, it never ever went this far. It never went anything like this.
Right. As a disclaimer.
To make it clear, I was perfectly fine as a kid.
Right.
Like, I was bullied, but the bullies didn't actually care about my pretend games. They never played to me, so it was fine.
Right.
I was fine. But when I was writing it, it was very natural for me to think, oh, they're playing a pretend game of, like, I don't know, castle and a queen. So then when I realized it was going to be horror, it was very simple to go, okay, let's take this to the extreme. What would happen if they didn't think maybe we should stop? Or if they thought maybe we should stop, but it was way too late for them to admit to doing so. If the sunk cost fallacy was too high for them to agree to it.
Right.
And then Hawthorne House happened.
Yeah, it's a great twist, because I do like the idea that there is a point in the story where there's no turning back, where the risk factor is too high for the different characters. And so But I mean, when we get manuscripts, usually it involves some kind of like synopsis, and I never read them because I never want to know what's going to happen. And so I want to be able to kind of naturally like read the story and see if it makes sense to me and see if it's plausible to me and it comes to a conclusion that, you know, interesting and catches my eye. And Steve always knows when I'm going to green light because I'll stay up all night reading, you know. And there's sometimes where I like have to pace myself to read. Like I'm like, okay, we've read one chapter today. We have to get 8 hours of sleep tonight. So we are not going to read any more chapters today. And
Right.
it's brutal for me because I'm one of those binge readers. So
yeah, and I know as soon as the lights out and I'm asleep, you're going to be
right. The lights back on and I'm reading. Right. I do. I call it tucking him in. I'm like, okay, let's get you tucked in and safely asleep so I can flip my Kindle back on and the light won't wake you up. So yeah. So is there a piece of the book that you want to read today on the live for us?
I think so.
Okay.
I have a piece from the beginning of chapter 2.
Okay.
And for a bit of context, 2 new girls have arrived at Hawthorne House, and the current players of the Clover Court immediately thought, right, time to get you in the game. The 2 girls were obviously a bit resistant considering what the game is, and they started taking matters into their own hands. And Rosalind is caught in the crossfire. So this is from the beginning of chapter 2 charter. The page crunched as Willow picked it up and clenched her hand into a fist before walking a few feet to the middle cubicle toilet in slow, disciplined steps, her patent shoes dragging on the tiles, the spiders forgotten. Rosalind could only watch from above, not daring to make a sound as Willow pinched the chain between finger and thumb and pulled until it came free. With a 16 squelch, the pendant on the other end jerked out from the mess in the toilet bowl and hung in the air, dripping scummy water everywhere and marking Willow's dress and shoes with dark spots. Rosalind had never seen a pendant in much detail before, as Willow insisted on wearing it constantly, tucked under her blouse or dress so that only a slight lump could be noticed. She could see now that it was a locket, the kind of an engraving on the front and a hinge on the side, but the front was badly dented and the hinge was bent. Rosalind wasn't certain that the locket would be able to open properly now, but that wasn't her problem. Knowing the others, the new girl's locket hadn't been like that before. And then she went very still and looked up at Rosalind. Her scowling face darkened like Rosalind had never seen before. It wasn't me, I swear. Rosalind hastily pulled her hands down from the gap in the ceiling tiles, stumbling over her words in her haste to get them out. I didn't know that locket was there. I didn't take it or put it there or have the idea to. And I would never do that anyway, so... And it wasn't you who filled Marie's pillowcase with thumbtacks either, I expect. Oh, of course, my mistake. You would never, ever, ever do something mean like that. Her glare was scathing. Rosalind was nearly intimidated by a stick-thin girl with a ruined locket and cobwebs in her hair. That was necessary. You're just a duchess. You wouldn't understand. I bet you didn't know that I saw you messing with pillowcases, just so you didn't know that I could see you just now. Willow was too hurt to be triumphant. Rosalind watched the locket's chain tremble with her efforts to keep her voice at least a little hushed, even though their voices echoed in the cramped lavatory. You're always sneaking and spying, thinking so much better than me and Heather, and acting like the queen you're not. Willow sent the toilet with a disgusted look, then turned it on Rosalind. You wouldn't be hiding your things if you hadn't done this. So get off your throne, O high and mighty princess, before I make you. It was like the other girl didn't even realize that Rosalind had the higher ground, though she made sure to look down at her, leaning over and resting her hands on the cubicle partition. I didn't take your stupid locket, so maybe you should go into suspect whoever actually did it, instead of just blaming the closest person. Or maybe, just maybe, you should earn your place to be a princess. It's gotta be better than you deserve right now. Rosalind realized with a start that she was beginning to sound like Marie. But in that moment, she didn't care how nasty the words were twisting in her mouth. She wanted Willow to hurt. She wanted Willow to listen to her, as was her right as princess. She wanted to storm out in a flurry of self-righteousness, but she couldn't risk Willow ruining her stuff before she could find a new hiding place for them. Willow stamped her foot, punctuating her fury-hurt words with the way the noise reverberated against the tiles, bouncing off the walls and floor. Fine. Maybe I will then, and you'd all be sorry. I thought you were nice to them. It looks like I was wrong to hope for the best, with all the spying and stealing my things. The paper in her fist tore as her fingers broke through it. The book tucked under her arm slipped a little. Why would I help the queen? I'm trying to earn her crown, not make sure she keeps it. I don't want Sophie taken up again. Something crashed outside as the wind picked up, howling round the corner of the house. It probably wasn't Sophie who did this, and if it was Marie, then you helped her. Me and Heather have done nothing to you. So let's see how you and Sophie and Marie like it to taste your own medicine. With that, Willow gave the locker the good shake over the toilet to get the worst of the muck off, then turned on her heel and left the cubicle, not even looking at Rosalind. It really wasn't me. Honest. You're a liar, Rosalind. I can't hear you. Oh no.
I forgot I had muted it because the cat was crying in the background. But I love that scene in the book because I think it's very revealing about how so many of the different characters think, like what their individual personal process is. And so that's one of my favorite scenes in the book. So, okay, so.
Well, would you like to tell us a little bit about what you might have working on now, what's coming out, what we might see from you in the future?
I don't currently have anything scheduled to be published. However, I am currently working on a collection of doll stories set in the Victorian to Edwardian era.
Okay.
Very gothic horror.
Yeah.
And I recently finished like the novelette that's going to be in there.
Okay.
It's a lot of fun to write. I also have an idea for a novella sitting in here. I don't know too much about it yet, but it's going to be kind of marshy, kind of boggy.
Okay.
Kind of lost in the fog, moorland kind of thing. And I also have a microfiction chapbook that I'm currently trying to get published. I have quite a lot of projects sort of on the back burner.
Yeah.
And I've just finished my master's degree. Literally on Friday I finished it. So now I actually have time to work on things.
Right. You have a little more of the brain back. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. My brain is returning.
Yes. Well.
Is there anything you'd like to say specifically to your readers? Even just thank you for reading.
Yes. Thank you so much for giving my book a chance. And it was written most of it was written in 2019.
Interesting.
And I started writing in 2017, like writing properly. So I hope you'll also read my future stuff. Because I'm having a whole lot of fun writing it. Potentially more fun than I had writing Hawthorne House, which is already a lot of fun. And I'd also like to thank my family and my friends for listening to me go on about this constantly. Because they were my sounding boards for 3.5 years.
Right. They were the good support group, right?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So read the book. Hopefully you enjoy it. If you don't, that's fine.
Right. Yeah. So it's still on sale on Amazon and for 99 cents USD the ebook, and you should be able to pick it up anywhere books are sold. So I just got notification that it's going live in some of the other bookstores, especially their online versions. So you'll be able to find it at Barnes & Noble, Blackstone, and Waterstone. I get Blackwell's and Waterstone mixed up. I want them so very much to just be one. So and you can get it on Kindle or Nook or I can't even remember the rest of them. There's like 10 different ebook ebook options. So the ebooks will be on sale through Friday. So you still have an opportunity to pick it up at the discounted price, and then over the weekend it'll go to regular price.
It is currently about 76.80p in the UK for film deal and £10 something for pay.
Oh, great. So it's finally lined up. Yes, yeah.
It only took like several days. It's fine.
Yeah, only several days. Yeah, it's the kind of things that give you panic attacks in the middle of the night if you're a publisher. You're like, why? Why is this not the normal exchange rate? We had one that we have an Irish author, and he could not get the book. Like nobody in Ireland could buy the book from Amazon UK. They had to buy it from Amazon Germany, and I was like, that doesn't even make sense. Like I don't even understand why that's happening. But there's just some interesting kinks in the distribution world. So yeah, that just makes it more interesting. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know it's late where you are. So
it's fine. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Yeah, well, we will see you later. Happy book launch week. All right.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for helping and everything. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been our pleasure. Thank you. Bye. Okay.